Talia is my third child, so I'd already previously had 2 other pregnancies. So when it came to this third pregnancy, it was clear to me that something wasn't right. I went running to the doctor and said, please check, please check. And he's like, it's too early, why do you want me to check now? And I said, I have a really strong feeling that something's not right. And we went to the doctors and they checked me out and they said, how pregnant are you? And I said, well, I'm about 20 weeks now. And they said, no, you're not. I said, yes, I am. They said, no, your baby is a lot smaller than 20 weeks. So obviously this is when things started happening and I thought, something is definitely wrong. They checked me out and they said, actually, we don't know what's going on. We can see there's something wrong with the pregnancy. And so they said, you have to go on bed rest. And that's when it all started really going wrong. Now, I had this instinct in me because I could feel that the sensation in my stomach wasn't the same. There was hardly any movement. And my stomach, instead of being like quite tight and hard, you could feel that it was very soft. It was like there was nothing there. So through my pregnancy, I was very, very concerned, actually. And I remember at the end saying to Mum, I just really want them to get this baby out okay.
Look at the kite.
Look at that.
Look out to sea. Where's the sea?
Shani Bacarese Hamilton lives in the south of Spain with her husband Andrew and their daughters Tara, Natasha and Talia. Talia was born on the 28th of June 2007, and it quickly became evident that she had a serious condition, but the doctors were perplexed and couldn't provide an accurate diagnosis of what was wrong with her. So Shani decided to take matters into her own hands. She was faced with a situation which, in her words, she just had to get on and deal with. Prior to giving birth to Talia, Shani had no medical qualifications or expertise whatsoever and no experience of how to cope with a special needs child. But just coping with Talia wasn't enough. She wanted to find out what was wrong with her daughter and whether there was a cure. And so began a long journey, one that would take Shani all over the world, searching for answers.
Cheeky girl, how are you?
Hey.
Good, and how was your day?
Bye.
Fine? Who did you play with? Oh, you saying bye to Noelia? Say bye-bye. Say bye-bye. No, you cheeky girl. Well, when Talia was first born, I remember just being so relieved to have her in my arms and just to think, wow. To be very honest with you, through the pregnancy, I didn't know if I was going to get to that stage. When she was born, they did the normal APGAR test and that came out fine. But I remember at the very beginning of the hospital, actually, Mum was in the hospital, and I remember I was in the shower and she called me, Mum, quick, come, something's happened. And she thought she saw like a slight change in her breathing. So we called the nurses, but obviously once the nurses were there, everything seemed to be fine. So we just thought, well, new baby, nothing much. She was small. She was only just 2.3 kilos, but not that much smaller than my other kids had been. What we noticed were her hands were very purple and she looked tiny. But we took her home, and for the first 4 to 6 weeks, she did start putting on weight. And she was a very easy to look after baby. Once we got to about 5 or 6 weeks, I started realizing a few changes. We saw there weren't many reflexes. She started to smile quite late. There was very, very, very weak muscle tone, and she would suddenly get listless. All of a sudden, we'd have a day out, and all of a sudden, she'd just flop. We went to the doctors, and for the first 2 or 3 months, they said, there's nothing you can do. She could just be late. She could just be developing a little more slowly. Don't worry. Again, having had the 2 other girls, I was thinking, something's wrong. The reflux was awful. She was really, really quite bad with it. And apart from that, we tried to give her a bottle, and there was no way she could take a bottle. Her eyes as well would roll around her head. And that would really scare me, because you'd look at her and all of a sudden her eyes would just go right round her head. Her muscle tone in her cheeks was really quite weak. And it was constant symptoms of that.
interesting journey that my wife and I started back in 1989. Our daughter Gina at the time was 10 years old and had a seizure. Woke up that wasn't feeling well and had actually thrown up, and we thought she was coming down with a virus, with a flu. So we cleaned her up and put her back to bed, and later that same morning she did have a fully involved epileptic seizure, and that started our journey to the emergency rooms.
Unknown to Shani at the time, across the other side of the Atlantic, Chuck Mohan had also embarked on the same journey that transported them both into the world of mitochondrial disease. They both had begun looking for clues and an answer to what was wrong with their respective daughters. With no formal medical experience, they both had to soak up the plethora of medical terms and technical expressions and research a multitude of physical conditions and their symptoms.
So we started with all kinds of tests, which just were normal blood tests. We couldn't see anything wrong there. We looked into hypothyroidism, we looked into cystic fibrosis. We were referred to the state hospital in Marbella, where one of the doctors did actually say, we think she could have a metabolic condition, but nobody knew what was going on. We went to the UK, we did a brain scan, we did MRI, and then they said, well, look, we really think that there's some kind of brain damage. But when the results came back, it was all clear. So we were really in a position where we had no idea what was going on. They tested for a lot of illnesses. They tested for things like Prader-Willi, for many of the well-known syndromes that you hear about these days. Again, everything came back clear. So we did a number of genetic tests, a number of blood tests, but still at a loss. Doctors were at a loss.
During her pregnancy, Shani decided to start a blog, which would evolve into a daily record of her experiences, her feelings and emotions, and the progress and results of the research she had embarked on. Blog entry, 9th of July 2008. Excellent metabolic site. Can't believe it's already Thursday tomorrow. Where has the week gone? Yesterday, I decided to be brave again and do some research on metabolic and mitochondrial problems. It's a very tough subject to understand, but my brother-in-law sent me a fantastic website, a Mitochondrial Disease Foundation in Pittsburgh, America. Any parents concerned about metabolic illness should look at this site. So far, it's one of the most comprehensive sites that I've seen. The Americans seem to be way ahead on this subject. They're coming up with supplements, etc., that whilst they do not cure these conditions, they can help to manage them and avoid them from progressing too rapidly. We may have to think about heading to the States if we hit a brick wall here. The organisation that Shani had come across was Chuck Mohan's United Mitochondrial Disease Foundation. Shani and Chuck met for the first time in 2013 at a meeting of the International Mito Patients Group, which took place in Holland. Their stories were remarkably similar, so naturally they immediately bonded.
For about 4 years, we're following what we were told was a seizure disorder. So it was being treated with a lot of anticonvulsants, but it didn't get better. It began to get worse. And so we started to travel, seeing different professionals, different members of the medical community, not only in our state, but across the country. For the next 4 years, we tried to track down the origin of this mysterious seizure disorder, only to be told that it was thought that this might be something of a metabolic nature. We'd never heard the word mitochondrial disease until May of 1994. And that's when the doctor called us up and said, Mr. and Mrs. Mohan, would you mind coming to my office? I think we have a clinical diagnosis for Gina. So we went to his office, and he, at that time, said, my working diagnosis will be MELOS. And I said, well, what is MELOS? And he said, MELOS is mitochondrial encephalopathy, lactic acidosis, and stroke-like syndrome. It's a mitochondrial disease.
Mitochondria are the power plants of the cell. They are living, breathing production factories whose job it is to convert food molecules into chemical energy. Our cells use that energy to keep us going. Our bodies are fueled by oxygen and the nutrients we get from food. The protein, fats and carbohydrates we consume go through a chemical process that converts them to energy, which in turn fuels our cells and keeps us moving and growing. It's an automatic process that works around the clock until there's a breakdown. That breakdown and the problems that come with it are known as mitochondrial disease.
So what was very interesting to my wife and I is that at the time of our daughter's clinical diagnosis, we were told she was 1 in 200,000 patients with this particular disease. Today, because of increases in technology and a larger casted net of awareness amongst the medical community, we now know she's 1 in 4,000. That's how common this disease is.
The mitochondrial diseases were disorders that appeared in childhood and may get progressively worse as children become adults, but that these were childhood diseases. That is not true at all. What we're finding out is that a lot of our patients with bona fide mitochondrial disease don't have their first symptoms into their 50s or 60s.
Mitochondrial diseases can be produced for mutations in the nuclear DNA or for mutations in the mitochondrial DNA. If they are produced in proteins codified in the nuclear DNA, the inheritance of the disease will be Mendelian. That means the father and the mother contributes to the disease. If the mutation is produced in the mitochondrial DNA, the inheritance is maternal, because the mitochondria is inherited only from the mother. The mother passes the mitochondria to all the children, men and women, and only the women pass to the next generation all the mitochondria.
One of the common misconceptions is that if you have a mitochondrial disease, that you inherited that from your mother. Well, that's true if the mitochondrial disease is due to a mutation in the mitochondrial DNA. But the vast majority of mitochondrial diseases are due to mutations in the nuclear DNA. Therefore, there would be a component from the mother and a component from the father. Any organ that has a high energy requirement is possibly subject to mitochondrial failure. The brain is the most affected organ in children with mitochondrial disease. How this will manifest itself can be anything from as mild to a migraine-type headache, to a stroke, to seizures, to mental retardation. So there's not just one specific symptom of a mitochondrial disease that runs the red flag up to get us concerned, but really the combination of many symptoms and signs over many organ systems. When I think about how patients present with mitochondrial disease, they tend to present with 3 or more signs and symptoms in 2 or more organ systems.
The story started when my son was born. He was born perfectly fine and healthy. After so many months, he started going to nursery school like most other children do. And it was in the nursery where they realized something was wrong with his mobility, with his muscles. He started having respiratory trouble, so they alerted us. We immediately took him to the pediatrician, and the pediatrician referred us to the hospital. Up to that point, it seemed our son had met a lot of development milestones. He could hold his head up, he learned to sit up, and started to say a few words. Then all of this he lost in such a short time. For us, this was something very, very new, because we have an older daughter who's never had this experience. In hospital, things started to get complicated and he stopped breathing. He spent a couple of months in intensive care, and that is when we really became aware of the kind of illness our son had.
So at that point, my wife, who was very confused, as I was with the diagnosis, said, well, is there a treatment? Is there a pill? Is there some type of treatment course that we should begin? And he said, no, there's absolutely no treatment, and it's going to get worse. And at that point, my wife asked, well, is this life-threatening? And the pediatrician looked at us and said, yes. Usually life expectancy is from late childhood to early adult. And our daughter was 14 years old.
So obviously I just thought they'd find something. So when they didn't, I started wondering what's going on here. Well, what are we dealing with? So my first instinct was, once you ask the people around you, then you ask the doctors, then you go to all your contacts, you think, the internet is obviously, people say it's very, very dangerous, because you go in and you think you have every single disease in the world, but it was also my saviour. And when I went on the internet, I started putting in the symptoms, which actually, if you look up weak muscle tone, if you look up reflux, if you look up problems with swallowing, you get nearly every single syndrome on the list. But I started breaking it down, I started looking at different things, and eventually I looked at metabolic conditions and came across a few very, very good websites, such as the UMDF in America, and realized, could Talia have some kind of metabolic condition? And this is what eventually led us down the path of mitochondrial disease.
But began investigating, began asking questions that very few people had answers to. So we started to really look across the United States. We started to email and search for other parents that had these mysterious mitochondrial diseases. So I was able to find an organization called the Cox Foundation, COX, standing for cytochrome C oxidase deficiency. And a subline under that title was that this is a foundation for mitochondrial diseases. So it was the first time I had heard the word mitochondrial disease. And so I immediately made a phone call to this person who told me that her son had passed away from a mitochondrial disease called cytochrome C oxidation deficiency, and she was looking for somebody to help her with research. So I was able to contact her, and we befriended each other, and we were exchanging information. And then one day she called me up and she said, "Chuck, can you come over to my home? I have information for you." So I did, and when she opened the door, her entire home was packed up in boxes. And I said, "What are you doing?" And she said, "My husband and I are moving. We're moving to Jerusalem, and I need somebody to take over the foundation. So I'm giving all of this to you." And so I went home with a shoebox full of computer disks and still a lot of questions. And so my wife and I sat down with some other friends. We're ex-school teachers, so we engaged some of the friends that we were teaching school with at the time to help us sift through all of the information. And we realized that it contained information from 85 parents across the states. And so we contacted those 85 parents and said, we're going to put together a questionnaire, a registry of sorts, and we're asking you to answer this information. And once we get this information, we'll codify it, we'll put it all together, and we'll send you a free copy of it so that you might be able to learn from other parents' experiences. So we did that, and we created the first ever registry. And so at that point, we had 85 parents involved and caught the attention of a group in another state that was doing a first ever scientific conference for mitochondrial diseases. And we were invited to go as the Cox Foundation. So we went, and I was asked to speak to the group to talk about what we were doing as a foundation. And at that point in time, our daughter, 8 months after having the diagnosis, had lost her battle. She passed away January 20th, 1995 from MELAS, or what was suspected to be MELAS, but what was definitely a mitochondrial disease.
Sadly, our son passed away when he was 3 years old. Mitochondrial problems got to his heart, and unfortunately, his heart failed. The experience I had with my son, and the time that I had with him, I see as a very positive thing, because we lived very much for the moment. We spent every day with him. We did everything we could possibly do so he could have the best quality of life. It is for that reason that I am here, and why I'm able to talk about this without becoming overly emotional, although many times I do get emotional when I talk about it. But it is for this reason that I can explain a little bit of what I lived through with him, and that's just a little part of the story.
Shani's research introduced her to the Spanish-based organization Asociación de Enfermos de Patologías Mitocondriales, in English, the Association of Patients with Mitochondrial Disease, where she met Javier Pérez Mínguez Caneda, who is a director of the Ana Carolina Diez Mau Foundation. The tragic loss of his son to mitochondrial disease led Javier on the same search for answers, and today both he and Shani serve on the board of the association, participating at global meetings to represent patients with mitochondrial disease.
I, like probably most other mums, thought, oh well, there's so many doctors out there, there's so much science, there's so much research. What is the likelihood that they're not going to know what's wrong with her? Walk to mommy.
From birth, Talia had difficulties in meeting major development milestones, such as holding her head up, crawling, standing, walking, and even swallowing. So Shani decided to submit her to as many different therapies as possible and to record her progress on video. The videos taken of Talia were shared through the website Onion, which Shani set up to help other parents of children suffering from mitochondrial disease. Suspecting that Talia may have a form of dwarfism, Shani decided to attend a conference under the title Walking with Giants, which was held in Liverpool in 2009. By the time the conference was over, Shani was convinced that Talia's problem was not a form of dwarfism, but the visit taught her that there were many parents out there searching for diagnosis for their sick children. As Shani had predicted in her July 2008 blog, her search took her and Andrew to the States, to the Pediatric Neurology Department of the Cleveland Clinic, where tests were carried out on Talia, the results of which indicated that it could possibly be a mitochondrial condition. The trip took all their savings, and Shani still didn't have a definitive answer.
Well, I think Talia's come a long way with yoga therapy, actually. In the beginning, it was more something to move her body and to get her muscles working. It was also something that I used to try and get her to relax. What you find with mitochondrial disease, which is what Talia has, is that there's a lack of energy. So just looking at the nature of yoga and the science of yoga, the deep relaxation, the meditation, it's all a way of generating energy and all a way of focusing energy. So in that way, it felt that teaching Talia yoga would help her with her energy aspect. In actual fact, it's helped her in a lot of other ways that I didn't expect. I really feel her speech has come on. I feel there's been a big difference. I guess it's because she's had to follow instructions. So to start with, someone would help her doing it, and later she learned to imitate. She's learned parts of the body, she's learned counting when they're holding in postures, and up to now she's done one-to-one. And in fact, today where we're going is she's going to be part of a kids class, a general, normal kids class. And this is probably the first time in her life where she'll be in this kind of setting without an aide or someone there to watch over her. I don't actually go into this class. So not only is Talia learning yoga, not only is she learning about her energy and how to control it, not only is she exercising, it's also helping her in a different way, socially, how to look after herself, how to organize herself so that she has to sit in with a social setting without actually having anyone to guide her. I mean, obviously there's teachers there, but it's different. It's not mum and it's not an aide who's just there for her.
Next straight leg, breathing in, reaching up. Touch your toes and stay on toes.
What happens when you have a child with special needs is you feel unconditional love, you see so many different things. And one of the things that really brings this to you is the different therapies. What you see with therapy, I went to the doctors, I went to one doctor, and she turned around and said to me, "What are you doing?" And I said, "What do you mean, what am I doing? Why are you looking around everywhere?" I said, "Because I want to help my child." And she said to me, "Help your child? You can't help your child. Don't you know she's sick? Go home, shut the door, and wait for her to die. And if I'd listened to her, and I wonder how many parents do, what would have happened? But the beautiful thing about therapies is that it's something that you can do. And what parents need to know is, no matter what a doctor tells you, and there's some wonderful doctors who really have helped us, so I'm not against doctors, but whatever anybody tells you, because sometimes it's family members, the most important thing is to enjoy that moment. And one of the beauties of therapies is that we started doing physiotherapy, and through the physiotherapy, I saw a different Talia. I saw Talia who went in like she was just like a handkerchief. She really was like a rag doll. And I saw a girl coming up with increased tone. I saw such a difference in her. Plus, she was motivated. I think you start having a motivation.
¿Cómo hace? Cucú, muy bien. ¿Y aquí? ¿Qué tenemos? A. Vamos, A.
Talia has responded well to the different forms of therapies, which have not only improved her mobility, but also her communication skills. She began by learning sign language, but now, remarkably, she is able to understand and is beginning to speak in 2 languages, English and Spanish.
Talia, you've had a good day at school today, haven't you? She had PE today. So she loves her PE, which for me is amazing, because to think that when Talia started school she couldn't walk, and just in a couple of years she's gone from not even being able to walk to loving PE. It's quite something, really. Talia goes to a school called St. George's. St. George's is a really, really lovely school. It is very family orientated. It's actually a villa which is converted into a school, so it has that, logistically it works fantastically for Talia. She doesn't have to walk for long distances. She started school when she was only 3 years old, and when she first went into school she couldn't speak and she couldn't walk. It was at school that she got motivated by all those around her to learn to start talking. It gave her something none of us could have given her, the inspiration to be able to do lots of other things, and the inspiration to want and to desire to do those things, the motivation. The great thing about St. George's is that it's a school for all types of children. It's a mainstream school, and in Talia's case she actually goes in with an aide. They're fantastic at mixing her in though with all the other pupils. She's made loads of fabulous friends, and the great thing is that there's a learning on both sides. There's learning from the class around her so that they know how to deal with someone like Talia in society, and vice versa. They've taught Talia how to live in society. It's really loving. They have homemade food, and for us it's been a really, really big step, and something that really makes Talia very, very happy.
Talia's elder sisters, Tara and Natasha, have also played a significant role in her development, not least of all by teaching her to dance. They've also helped with spreading awareness of mitochondrial disease, and in 2014 decided to speak about her and their feelings towards her in a TED Talk recorded in Torremolinos on Spain's Costa del Sol.
Se llama Talia, tiene 6 años y nació el 28 de junio del 2007. Cuando nació supimos que le pasaba algo, ya que tenía las manos moradas y era muy pequeña.
At the end of the talk, they brought Talia onto the stage and received a standing ovation from the audience.
Esta es Talia. Y nos ha cambiado la vida. Gracias.
I feel that it's kind of normal. Maybe she doesn't talk, but now she can even run. She can walk. At first, no one thought that she could do it. That she was gonna be able to do anything. But now look at her. She even tries to read. She can definitely hear us, and she can see, even though sometimes she goes really close to the TV. But I find it like she's a normal, regular sister, and I love her.
Well, she's amazing. She's like one of the happiest people I've ever met. She's even happier than people that don't have her disease. Of course, we all get worried about her now and then because any cold, any slight thing can make her get very sick. But she's just amazing. She really fights for what she wants. Like, she really wants to be able to talk, she really wants to be able to walk, and she does everything so that she gets there.
So Talia loves playing with her cousins because they treat her as a normal human being, as a normal child, whereas a lot of other people would be treating her with a bit of special care or special needs. Her cousins play with her as normal, they treat her as normal, and she learns to interact. If she does something wrong, they tell her off, and she's learnt a lot from just playing with her cousins.
I think she doesn't want people feeling sorry for her. That's why I think she's so happy with like playing with her cousins, because they treat her normally. Instead of saying, oh, she's special needs, we need to take care of her a bit less aggressively, but they just treat her normally.
So she's really inspired by her friends and her family because she learns from them. So when we're at a restaurant or something, she would have never known that she has to sit properly or that she has the knife and fork to eat. But thanks to them, she treats them as, well, they're her role model. So she does everything that they do. So they teach her unconsciously, which is really nice to see. For example, in the park, she would have never known how to go on a seesaw, on a swing. She would have been scared, but when you see friends or cousins having fun, she just enjoys it, so she learns how to do it, and I feel like she's come so far thanks to these people.
In March 2015, the British government passed the Human Fertilisation and Embryology Mitochondrial Donation Regulations 2015, which came into force on the 29th of October 2015. The media dubbed it the three-parent family law, and Britain became the first country in the world to permit this kind of research.
The UK is the first country ever to actually let them do this new thing that they're doing with mitochondrial replacement, which is what they're actually doing is, if you think of an egg, you think of the egg yolk, they've got two eggs. The mitochondria have their own DNA, and they lie outside in the egg white. And then you have the nucleus, which has all the genetic makeup. So what they're doing is they're getting another egg from another woman, which has the egg white, which is completely healthy. The woman who carries the mitochondrial mutation has the egg white, and in the egg white is all the unhealthy mitochondria. And they're taking out this egg yolk from the healthy one and putting in the healthy egg yolk from the lady with mitochondrial into the new egg. So you're creating a new egg with healthy mitochondria and a healthy nucleus.
Now we have Madame Chelaram, or Ni Chelaram, part 2, but it's actually Shani Bakarese Hamilton.
That's right.
And Shani, you've come on board because now, being on a serious note, you want to raise awareness for your daughter. We want to raise awareness for your daughter with a disease which very few people probably know very much about.
As Vice President of the Asociación de Enfermos de Patologías Mitocondriales, Shani spends much of her time spreading awareness of mitochondrial disease and raising funds for research into the condition. Driven by her love for Talia, her research has transformed her to the point she is now able to confidently converse with medical professionals on the subject.
I mean, I think this is why I decided to be part of this association, which is just Mito rather than others, because there was so much research to be done. There's so much still to know. It's a very new disease. I mean, the first mutations were found in the 70s, 75.
Really?
Such is her depth of knowledge and determination. In 2015, she became instrumental in organising one of the first comprehensive medical symposiums on mitochondrial disease to be held in Spain, and attended by doctors, researchers, health carers and therapists. The symposium was followed the next day by a gala dinner under the title Energy for Life.
Well, tonight we've got a gala dinner, and this is to raise awareness and funds for mitochondrial disease. I'm really, really excited about it. There are lots and lots of children and adults who suffer from this illness, and unfortunately it's so unknown. So tonight we really want people to get to know about it, and we're raising money to try and build a clinical registry, and with that hopefully bring people together, create a critical mass, and try and work towards clinical trials and eventually finding a cure. So I'm so excited. There's going to be lots going on tonight. There's going to be dance, music. It's going to be great fun, Talia, isn't it? Great fun.
Guests at the gala dinner included the Gibraltar Government Minister for Health, Shani's co-vice president Javier Perez Minguez Caneda, and Chuck Mohan, who had flown over from the States specifically to attend and speak at the event.
You know, when our daughter was pretty ill, my wife called me up and said, "There's something wrong with Gina, you need to come home." And so my business is only 4 miles from home. I jumped in a car, immediately went home. And I walked into the room, and my daughter looked at me, and she looked at me as though she didn't know who I was. She was scared. Well, she was suffering from dysphagia, aphasia. She could see, and she thought she understood what I was, but didn't connect what she saw with what the brain understood. So I can remember holding up a spoon and holding up a pen. And I said, "Gina, what are these?" Didn't know. But I said, "Gina, what's the spoon?" She could point to the spoon. And I sat down, and she was in bed, and I leaned close to her, and I whispered in her ear. And I said, "You know, Gina, Mommy was scared. She called me up. Are you okay?" And she grabbed me by the collar. She pulled my ear next to her mouth. And she said, "Daddy, please don't lose me. Because of you, she's not lost. She's having a major impact in all these children, in all these adults, and all these researchers. So for that, I thank you, and I applaud you."
It's very often that illnesses and diseases which perhaps are not ones that are commonly known seem to be forgotten. And they are so important in focusing what we need to do for the community, because every single person is important. So I think that what's gone into this, the initiative, the work that the families have done, and the legacy of the children whose stories we have seen is something that will live on for a very, very long time. And I'm very hopeful that with the commitment that I've seen, that not only will awareness make a difference, but there will be real progress in being able to treat the condition.
The amount needed to create the central registry was €30,000. By the end of the evening, Shani was delighted to announce that the target had been reached and work on creating the central registry could begin.
Anyway, the reason why we're here tonight is because we want to do something. We want to make a difference. I won't take no for an answer. I'm going to fight. We may not fight before.
The parents that get involved because of what I call vitamin P, passion. You do not need a PhD, you do not need an MD. You need to be on a quest for a cure. You need to have the passion to answer the questions that ultimately you yourself are asking. And what better person to do that than the caregiver or the parent of the child or loved one that's impacted.
Hi, this is Shani calling from Spain, from APME. I'm the Vice President too.
I feel that Shani's work with relation to helping Talia and helping the mitochondrial disease awareness is very important, not only for Talia, but in the bigger picture. She does help so many families, so many children, and so many adults as well with mitochondrial disease.
In her search for answers, Shani came across the Scripps Research Institute, which was carrying out a research program and looking for subjects with symptoms similar to Talia's.
Of course, when you look at illnesses and you look at mitochondrial disease and you look at rare illnesses, it's really hard not to think, what about the rest of my kids? What about your family?
Shani contacted the Scripps Institute and was accepted onto the research program, the first family allowed to do so outside of the US. The program required her to submit all of Talia's medical notes to date and blood samples taken from Talia, Andrew and herself for exome genetic testing.
Wow. Finally got the results. This is the famous exome.
The results of the gene sequencing tests were initially sent to her good friend, Professor Julio Montoya, who reviewed them and then forwarded them to her.
Julio, I was just ringing because I've just had Talia's results. And I wanted to know if you could explain them a bit to me.
Explain the results of the analysis?
Yeah, the results of the analysis. Because, yeah.
I can explain it a little bit.
The results finally provided Shani with the answers she had been looking for. She now had conclusive proof that Talia has a mitochondrial condition. Remarkably, the mutation in Talia's genes had not come from Shani alone. It had also come from Andrew. They had both been carriers of a defective gene that meant together they had a 1 in 4 chance of producing a child with mitochondrial disease. Shani's first 2 children were healthy, but mitochondrial disease can manifest at any age. It is possible that Tara and Natasha can be carriers of mitochondrial disease. However, Shani is currently awaiting the results of further functioning tests to establish if that is the case.
So I've got 2 other daughters, and are they carriers? What do they have? Will they be able to have kids? Now, one of the scary things about mitochondrial disease is that it can present at any age. It can present in adulthood. It can present during puberty. And there's many cases that I know where it has presented, and sometimes they're the hardest cases. I've seen perfectly healthy children till the age of 13 and 14, and then after that goes downhill.
The incidences of the mutation coming from both parents are extremely rare. The results provided some answers, but not a cure. There is currently no cure for Talia or for the thousands of other children suffering from mitochondrial disease. But there is hope. At least for now, Shani finally knows what the problem is. Her tenacity has given her a deeper understanding of mitochondrial disease and better equipped her to help Talia in the future. At the time of filming, Talia is approaching her 10th birthday. While still small at 110 centimetres and severely underweight at 13 kilos, Talia is meeting some key milestones. She has blossomed into a sociable girl who loves spending time with other kids and family. Her speech is developing slowly, and with the help of a communicator, she can write her name. She also understands both English and Spanish. There are good days and bad days. When she is sick, the family take a breath and deal with each day as it comes. The search for a cure continues. Shani, Chuck and Javier continue to travel to international meetings.
Reason, mitochondrial disease. We all have something in common. We are all searching for a cure.
In October 2016, Shani, Javier and AEPMI were instrumental in organising the Building Global Networks conference held in Madrid, Spain. The guests included Chuck Mohan, Julio Montoya, international Mito patient representatives, patients suffering from mitochondrial disease, and medical professionals. Awareness of Mito has improved significantly. A number of pharmaceutical companies are at the early stages of drug development and initial phases of clinical trials. The clinical patient registry is presently being implemented in Spain. Shani and Javier and their team at AEPMI are hoping that they can soon bring a clinical trial to Spain. Time is ticking, and it is a race against it to find a cure for Talia and her generation. Sadly, during her time as vice president in AEPMI, many patients have lost their battle to mitochondrial disease. Meanwhile, Shani, Andrew and their family make the most of each day they have with Talia. She is an inspiration to them all.
See a world so wide, see the other side. It will come to you, same world, different view. See the sky so blue, see the shining moon. It will come to you, same world, different view. See your dreams so clear, see our hopes and fears. It will come to you, same world, different view. See a baby cry, see an old man die. It will come to you, same world, but a different